Leah Benavides clutched her worn denim jacket tighter as she walked through Northwood Academy's busy corridors. 16 years old, just under 5'4", with thick auburn hair pulled into a messy bun and observant hazel eyes, she tried to be invisible. 4 months had gone by since her family relocated from Seville, Spain, to this quiet Canadian town, and Leah still felt like an outsider. The warning buzzer sounded as students hurried to homeroom. Leah kept her gaze low, moving past loud teens who hardly noticed her. She liked it that way. Back home, her grandmother Sophia had told her that true power came from being unseen. If they only knew, she mused, slipping into world history and finding her usual spot near the window. Leah's classmates saw a shy foreign girl with a slight lisp. They didn't know she had been training in jiu-jitsu since she was 7, that her mother Carmen had been a champion grappler in Spain, or that she could subdue someone much bigger with a single arm lock. But she kept those skills a secret. Her mother had extracted a promise when they left Seville. Leah would focus on school, on building a new life. Conflict had already taken too much from their family. Her older sister Alba had fallen in with a bad crowd, using her skills in back alley fights until she disappeared one night. The memory of her father's sorrow and her mother's fear kept Leah's hands folded calmly on her desk, no matter how badly others treated her. Jake Harrison noticed Leah during her 3rd week at Northwood Academy. At 17, he stood 6'3", with wide shoulders developed from years of competitive hockey. His light brown hair was always perfectly styled, his clothes designer, and he walked the hallways with his buddies trailing behind. Jake had controlled Northwood Academy's social scene since freshman year, and he could spot vulnerability. "Well, look what we have here," Jake announced one Wednesday morning as Leah walked by his locker. His voice had a tone that made other students pause to listen. "Little Spain thinks she can just stroll around here like she belongs." Leah kept walking, her fists clenched, but her face blank. She knew bullies thrived on reactions. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Jake yelled, catching up to her. His friend Derek Stone, a burly guy with a nasty grin, appeared on Leah's other side, trapping her against the lockers. "Too good to answer when someone speaks to you." "I don't want any trouble," Leah said softly, her accent making the words sound even gentler. "I just need to get to class." Jake chuckled coldly. "Did you hear that, Derek? She doesn't want any trouble. How polite." He leaned closer. "See, this is our school, and we don't like stuck-up foreigners who think they're better than everyone else." The hallway quieted as more students stopped to watch. Leah's hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to stay still. "Just walk away," she told herself. Grandma always said there's no honor in fighting someone who doesn't understand what they're doing. "Please move," Leah said, looking straight at Jake. "I don't want to be late." Something flashed in Jake's eyes at her calm reaction. He had expected tears, begging, maybe anger. Instead, he saw something that looked like pity. The realization that this small girl wasn't afraid of him made his face redden with anger and shame. "You think you're tough?" Jake moved closer, towering over Leah's small figure. "You think because you come from some bullfighting country, you're tougher than us?" The casual prejudice stung, but Leah had heard worse. What bothered her was how other students watched with distant curiosity. No one stepped in. It was entertainment. "I think you should let me pass," Leah said, her voice steady despite the anger rising in her chest. Jake's hand shot out and pushed Leah's shoulder, sending her stumbling back against the lockers with a loud bang. "I think you should learn some manners." For a second, Leah's muscles tightened with ingrained reflexes. Her mother's voice echoed, "Control the center, use their momentum, sweep the leg." The technique was so natural she could feel her body wanting to move, to respond with deadly efficiency. Instead, she straightened her jacket and picked up her backpack. "Okay," she said simply, and walked away. Behind her, she heard Jake's angry curse and Derek's disappointed laugh. Leah made it to math class with 20 seconds to spare, but Jake Harrison wasn't done with her. Over the next few weeks, the harassment grew worse with planned cruelty. Jake and his friends seemed to see Leah's refusal to fight back as a challenge and an insult. They blocked her way in hallways, dropped her textbooks, threw her homework around, and made loud remarks about lazy immigrants whenever she passed. Derek Stone was especially creative. He found out Leah's locker combination and started leaving cruel notes inside. "Go back where you came from. Nobody wants you here. Your English is terrible." Leah would find these messages tucked between notebooks, each designed to wear down her spirit. The mental pressure was worse than any physical fight would have been. Leah found herself taking long routes to avoid Jake's usual spots. She started eating lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria, claiming she needed to study when she really wanted to avoid public shame. Ashley Green, a blonde girl with perfect makeup and a fake smile, led the verbal attacks with skill. "Leah, is it true that girls in Spain have to beg for food?" she would ask in front of other students, her voice full of false concern. "I'm just wondering because you always look so serious. Are you hungry? Should we start a food drive?" The worst part was how other students reacted. Most just looked away, uneasy, but unwilling to get involved. A few laughed along, either because they thought it was funny or because they wanted to avoid being targeted themselves. Even teachers seemed to ignore what was happening. Leah began to hate school with surprising force. She had faced real danger in Seville, but there was something especially tiring about this constant, low-level cruelty. It wore her down like water slowly eroding stone. 3 weeks into the harassment campaign, Leah was leaving English class when Jake appeared beside her. "You know what I don't get about you, Spain?" Jake's voice was casual, almost friendly, which made it even more threatening. "You just take everything we throw at you like you're some kind of saint. It's weird. Most people would have lost it by now." Leah kept walking, breathing carefully. "I don't see the point in fighting." "No." Jake's laugh was curious. "See, I think you're just a coward. I think under that mysterious foreign girl act, you're just another scared little mouse who knows she can't handle what happens if she fights back." They had reached Leah's locker, and she began opening it with steady fingers. Behind her, she could feel Jake's presence like heat from a furnace. "My dad says people like you come here thinking you can just take advantage of Canadian generosity," Jake continued, his voice getting louder to get attention. "Says you probably snuck across the border in some boat, and now you think you deserve to be in classes with real Canadians." Leah's hand stopped on her locker door. The cruel nature of his assumptions about her family's legal immigration, his reduction of her identity to racist stereotypes, finally hit something deeper than her patience could cover. "Your dad sounds like a fool," she said softly, not turning around. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Jake's face flushed red at the insult to his father. "What did you just say to me?" Leah closed her locker and turned to face him, hazel eyes meeting his with calm steadiness. "I said your father sounds foolish. Anyone who teaches their son to judge people based on where they come from instead of who they are, that's foolishness." Jake seemed shocked that the quiet girl had finally fought back. Then his expression darkened with rage that made other students move away. "You little brat," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "And you have no idea who you're messing with," Leah replied, her voice still calm but with an edge that hadn't been there before. Something in her tone made Jake hesitate for a second, but then Derek Stone appeared beside him, and Ashley Green showed up with her phone out, ready to film what happened next. "We'll see about that," Jake said, moving so close that Leah had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "Tomorrow, lunchtime, you and me are going to settle this once and for all." Leah nodded once, her expression unreadable. "Okay." That night, Leah sat in her family's small apartment kitchen, staring at untouched homework while her mother cooked dinner. Carmen Benavides moved with the careful grace of a former athlete, her hands quick and precise as she chopped vegetables. At 44, she still had the controlled power that had made her a champion in Spain's jiu-jitsu scene. "Mija, you've been quiet tonight," Carmen said without looking up. "Is something bothering you at school?" Leah thought about telling her about Jake, about the weeks of bullying and tomorrow's promised fight. But she could see her mother's hands, how they moved with skill, and remembered why they had left Seville. Her sister Alba had been just as skilled, just as strong, and it had led her down a path that destroyed their family. "Just thinking about a test tomorrow," Leah lied, guilt heavy in her stomach. Carmen nodded but kept watching her closely. "You know, Mija, your sister used to get that same look when she was struggling with a problem she thought she had to solve alone." The mention of Alba made Leah's chest tighten. Her older sister had been her role model, the one who first taught her basic moves. Alba had been brave, fearless, everything Leah thought she wanted to be, until that strength became a weapon that drew the wrong attention. "I remember," Leah said softly. "Alba thought her strength was for fighting," Carmen continued, moving to the stove. "She thought that because she could win, she should win. That power was meant to be used." Carmen paused. "It took me too long to teach her that true strength. True strength is knowing when not to fight." Leah felt tears well up in her eyes. "What if someone doesn't give you a choice?" Carmen turned to look at her, dark eyes serious. "There is always a choice, Mija, but sometimes all the choices are hard ones." She moved to sit across from her. "Is someone at school giving you trouble?" Leah met her mother's gaze and saw not just concern but understanding. "There's a boy who's been making things hard. He says things about our family, about Spain, about me." Carmen nodded slowly. "And what do you want to do about this boy?" Leah thought about Jake's sneering face, about Derek's cruel notes, about Ashley's calculated insults. She thought about how other students looked through her like she didn't exist, how teachers pretended not to see what was happening. "I want him to stop," Leah said. "And if he won't stop when you ask him to?" Leah met her mother's eyes, seeing her own determination reflected there. "Then I want him to understand that he picked the wrong person to mess with." Carmen was quiet, studying her daughter's face. Then she stood and moved to a cabinet above their fridge, reaching behind boxes to pull out a small duffel bag Leah hadn't seen in months. Inside, wrapped in old cloth, were her old competition gi and belt. "Your sister's mistake was not that she fought," Carmen said, running her fingers over the worn fabric. "Her mistake was that she fought for the wrong reasons, for money, for fame, for pride." She looked at Leah. "But sometimes, Mia, we fight because it's the only way to protect something important. Sometimes we fight not because we want to hurt someone, but because we need them to understand that they cannot hurt us." Leah felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening after being closed for too long. "If this boy won't listen to words," Carmen continued, "then maybe he needs a different kind of lesson. But you must promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that when it's over, it's over. No revenge, no ego, no proving points. You teach him what he needs to learn, and then you walk away." Leah nodded, understanding. "I promise." Carmen smiled, the first real smile Leah had seen from her in weeks. "Then let's make sure you're ready to keep that promise." They spent the next hour going over techniques Leah hadn't practiced in months. Her body remembered the moves, the timing of a takedown, how to use her weight to control an opponent, the importance of leverage and position. Carmen watched. "Remember," she said as they finished, "you are not trying to destroy him. You are teaching him respect. There is a difference." The next morning, Leah walked into Northwood Academy with different energy. She wore the same denim jacket, carried the same backpack, but something had changed in how she moved. Students noticed a straightness to her back, a steadiness to her eyes. Jake was waiting at her locker, surrounded by his friends and a growing crowd who had heard about the promised fight. Word had spread with teenage gossip. By the time Leah arrived, there were at least 30 students. "Well, well," Jake announced loudly as Leah approached. "Look who decided to show up. I was starting to think you chickened out and ran back to Mexico." "Spain," Leah corrected, opening her locker. "And I don't run from bullies." The crowd stirred, sensing a change. Ashley Green pushed closer, phone recording. Derek Stone cracked his knuckles. Jake seemed surprised by Leah's calm. "We'll see about that," Jake said, grabbing Leah's shoulder and turning her around. "You think you can disrespect me and my family and just walk away?" Leah looked at him with steady hazel eyes, but now Jake could see something in them that made him step back. "I think you should take your hand off me." There was something in her voice, some certainty that sent a chill through the crowd. Jake felt it too, but his pride and the need to perform drove him. "Oh, what?" Jake demanded, tightening his grip. "What are you going to do about it, little girl?" Leah's voice stayed calm. "I'm going to ask you one more time to let me go." Jake laughed, harsh and forced. "And if I don't?" "Then you're going to learn something new about respect." The hallway had grown silent, except for the soft hum of lights. Jake looked at the watching faces, all waiting to see how he would handle this. "You know what?" Jake said, his voice getting louder as his anger grew. "I'm tired of your attitude. I'm tired of you walking around here like you own the place. Time someone taught you how things work in Canada." His hand moved from Leah's shoulder to grab her jacket, bunching the fabric. "Maybe you need to learn that immigrants don't get to talk back to—" Jake didn't finish the sentence. Leah's reaction was so fast that most students missed it. One moment Jake was grabbing her jacket. The next moment he was bent over, gasping, his face turning red. Leah had grabbed Jake's wrist with both hands, stepped back to create distance, and swept his leg, taking him to the ground. The crowd gasped. Derek Stone stood frozen, watching his seemingly invincible leader struggle. Ashley Green's phone captured Jake's humiliation. Leah released Jake's wrist and stepped back, giving him space while keeping herself ready. Her mother's training was clear, controlled, precise, using only necessary force. "Are you okay?" Leah asked, showing concern. Jake managed to sit up, his face red and breathing hard. The rage in his eyes was clear, but so was the realization that he had misjudged his opponent. You tripped me," Jake wheezed. "You grabbed me," Leah said. "I defended myself." "I'm going to destroy you," Jake said, his voice getting stronger. "You have no idea what you just started." Leah's expression stayed calm, but something shifted in her posture that made students step back. "I know what I started. The question is, do you know when to stop?" Jake looked at the crowd, seeing his shame in their faces. Months of bullying, of showing his power over the quiet immigrant girl, had been destroyed. "This isn't over," Jake snarled, pushing past Leah toward the exit, but everyone could hear the doubt in his voice. Derek Stone followed his leader, shooting Leah a look that mixed fear with respect. Ashley Green lowered her phone, staring at Leah like she was seeing her for the first time. The crowd began to leave, students talking excitedly about what they had seen. Leah gathered her books, her hands steady. Word of the fight spread through Northwood Academy. By lunchtime, everyone knew that Leah Benavides had taken down Jake Harrison, and the story got wilder with each telling. Leah ate lunch in the library, but she wasn't alone. Students found excuses to walk past her table, sneaking glances at the girl who had humiliated the school's biggest bully. Some even approached her, eager to be friendly. "That was awesome what you did to Jake," said a sophomore named Sarah, sitting down across from Leah. "I can't believe you knew karate or whatever that was." "Jiu-jitsu," Leah said, "and I don't like hurting people." "But he deserved it," Sarah said. Jake's been a jerk to everyone for years. Someone needed to put him in his place. Leah closed her book and looked at Sarah. Where were you when he was harassing me for the past 3 weeks? Sarah's enthusiasm faded. I wanted to say something, but it was easier to pretend you didn't see it, Leah finished, until I handled it myself. The truth in Leah's words sent Sarah away quickly, but she wasn't the last student to approach. Leah found herself answering questions, mostly from people who had never spoken to her, but now wanted to be near her. Jake was absent from the cafeteria, though reports said he was in the nurse's office claiming a headache. Leah knew he was probably fine physically. She had used only enough force to make her point, but his pride would take longer to heal. After her last class, as Leah was walking toward the exit, Jake made his move for revenge. She saw him coming across the parking lot with Derek Stone and 2 other hockey players she didn't know. Jake's face showed grim determination. Leah stopped walking and let them approach, her backpack loose on one shoulder and her posture relaxed but ready. Students noticed the situation and began to gather. "You think you're tough, don't you?" Jake called out when he was 20 feet away. "You think one lucky trip makes you some kind of badass?" Leah said nothing, watching as the boys spread out around her. She could see the anger in Jake's eyes, but also a need to restore his pride. "See, the thing is," Jake continued, moving closer, "I wasn't ready for you this morning. I was trying to be nice, trying to teach you a lesson without really hurting you." His voice was cruel. "But you want to play rough? We can play rough." Derek Stone stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. 4-on-1 seems about right for someone who fights dirty." Leah felt her mother's training kick in, her mind assessing distances, angles, escape routes. But she remembered her words about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. 4 opponents was too much. "I don't want to fight all of you," Leah said, her voice carrying to the watching students. "This should be between Jake and me." Jake laughed. "You don't get to make the rules anymore, Spain. You want to embarrass me in front of the whole school. Now you get to see what happens when you mess with people who have friends." But as Leah got ready to run, something happened. "Hey!" a voice called from across the parking lot. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned to see Miguel Sanchez, a senior who played soccer and had respect throughout the school, walking toward them with teammates. Miguel was tall, with broad shoulders, and carried himself with confidence. Jake's expression faltered. "Nothing that concerns you, Sanchez. Just settling things with the new girl." Miguel looked at the boys around Leah, then at the crowd watching, and his expression hardened. "Looks to me like 4 guys trying to jump 1 girl. That's not settling things, that's being a coward." "She started it," Derek Stone said. "She attacked Jake this morning." "I heard about that," Miguel said, his voice carrying. "I heard Jake grabbed her and she defended herself. Now it looks like you boys are planning revenge." He stepped closer, his teammates beside him. "That's not how real men handle problems." Jake's face flushed red. "This isn't your fight, Miguel. When I see 4 guys ganging up on a girl half their size, it becomes my fight," Miguel said. "You want to settle something with Leia? Do it 1-on-1 like a man, or walk away and save what's left of your reputation." The tension was thick. Jake looked at the crowd, seeing his shame as Miguel's words highlighted the cowardly nature of his plan. Leia watched this with a mix of gratitude and frustration. She appreciated Miguel's help, but part of her wanted to handle this herself. At the same time, her mother's voice echoed, "Sometimes the strongest choice is accepting help when it's offered." "Fine," Jake said, his voice tight. "You want 1-on-1? We'll do 1-on-1. He looked at Leah, his eyes blazing. "You and me, right now. No help." Miguel started to object, but Leia held up a hand to stop him. "Thank you," she said to Miguel, "but this is something I need to finish myself." Miguel studied her face, seeing something there that convinced him to step back. "Your choice," he said. "But if this gets out of hand, I'm stepping in." Leah nodded, then turned to face Jake. The crowd had grown larger, drawn by the chance to witness what promised to be a battle. Students pulled out phones to record what they thought would be a defining moment. Jake took off his jacket and handed it to Derek, his movements sharp. At 6'3" and 200 pounds, he dwarfed Leah, and the difference was clear. "Last chance to walk away," Jake said, rolling his shoulders and getting into what he thought was a fighting stance. "I'm not going to go easy on you just because you're a girl." Leah took off her jacket, showing a fitted t-shirt that showed the muscle her clothes had hidden. Students gasped. Without the jacket, Leah looked different. Her shoulders were broader, her arms strong, and she moved with the grace of someone comfortable in her body. "I wouldn't want you to," Leah replied, her voice calm. Jake rushed forward, relying on his size to beat her before she could use whatever had caught him off guard that morning. His attack was clumsy but strong, driven by rage. Leah moved like water. She slipped Jake's wild swing by inches, moving to his left, while her hands came up in the jiu-jitsu guard her mother had taught her. Jake's momentum carried him past her, and Leah's elbow found his ribs. Jake stumbled, more surprised than hurt, and spun to face her. This time he was more careful, understanding that his opponent had skills he had never seen. "Come on, Jake!" Derek Stone shouted from the sidelines. "She's half your size!" Jake feinted with his left hand and threw a right cross that would have dropped most opponents. Leah leaned back enough for the punch to miss, then stepped forward and tried to take him down. This time Jake was ready. He sprawled, stopping the takedown, and grabbed a front headlock, thinking he had her. Leah's mother had taught her what to do when an opponent had a front headlock. She posted on her left hand, rolled to her right, and used the momentum to sweep Jake. She took his back, sunk her hooks, and secured a rear naked choke. Jake tapped. The crowd gasped at the speed and skill. Leah released the choke and stepped back, already moving to keep the perfect distance. "This is crazy," someone whispered. "She's like a pro fighter or something." Jake shook his head, his respect for Leah growing. He had expected to beat her through size, but instead found himself being outclassed. "You want to keep going?" Leah asked, breathing steady. "Or are we done here?" Jake's answer was to charge again, trying to use his wrestling to take Leah down. He wrapped his arms around her waist and drove forward. Leah stepped to the side and locked in a guillotine choke. She jumped guard, pulling him down with her, and tightened her grip. Jake tapped again. Leah released him and stood up ready, but her expression showing no anger. This wasn't about hurting Jake, it was about teaching him a lesson. "It's over," Leah said, her voice carrying. "You're done." Jake wiped his face and stared, his expression dazed. The reality was hitting him. He had been beaten by someone half his size, and it had happened in front of the school. "I'm not done," Jake said, but his voice lacked force. He could feel pain, and every instinct was telling him to stop fighting someone who was clearly better. Leah saw the doubt in his eyes and pressed her advantage. "Yes, you are," she said, moving forward. "You can keep fighting and get hurt worse, or you can accept that you picked the wrong person and walk away with what you have left." The parking lot had grown silent except for Jake's breathing and traffic. Everyone understood that they were seeing a change, a shift that would ripple through Northwood Academy. Jake looked at the crowd, seeing his humiliation. His friends stood frozen. Miguel Sanchez watched. "This isn't over," Jake said, but everyone heard it was an empty threat. "Yes, it is," Leah said. "You're going to leave me alone. You're going to leave the other kids you pick on alone. And you're going to think before you decide to grab someone without their permission again." Jake opened his mouth to argue, but Miguel stepped forward, showing that Leah wasn't alone. "She's right, Jake," Miguel said. "You're done here. Go get checked out." Jake understood that he had lost more than a fight. His reputation, his dominance, his ability to scare others. All of it had been broken by someone he had seen as weak. He turned and walked toward the school, bloodied and defeated. Derek Stone and the other players followed, shooting nervous glances at Leah. The crowd left, students talking about what they had seen. Leah pulled her jacket back on and put on her backpack, trying to return to the anonymity she had lost. "That was amazing," Miguel said, approaching her. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "My mother taught me," Leah said. "She was a fighter in Spain." Miguel nodded. "You handled that well. Jake needed that lesson, and you taught it without going too far." Leah looked at the school where Jake had disappeared, feeling mixed emotions. "I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted him to understand." "Trust me," Miguel said. "He understands now, and so does everyone else." Over the next days, Leah's status changed. Students who had ignored her now knew her name, nodded when she passed, and made room for her at lunch. The video of her fight with Jake went viral and made her a local celebrity. More importantly, the bullying stopped. Not just against Leah, but against other students. Jake's defeat had shown that actions had consequences. Jake had changed. His ego took longer to recover than his body. He moved through school like a ghost, no longer in charge. 3 weeks after their fight, Leah was leaving school when she found Jake waiting by her locker, alone and nervous. "I wanted to say something to you," Jake said, his voice lacking pride. Leah waited. "I was wrong," Jake continued, the words hard to say. "About you, about the things I said about your family, about everything." Leah studied his face, seeing remorse. "Why?" she asked. Jake looked at his hands. "Because I was angry about stuff at home, and I took it out on you because I thought you were an easy target, because I was a coward who could only feel strong by making other people feel weak." The words hung in the air. Leah could see that it cost him to say them. "And?" Leah asked. "And I'm sorry," Jake said, meeting her eyes. "I know that doesn't fix what I did, but I wanted you to know that I understand why you had to stop me." Leah was quiet, thinking about her mother's words about showing mercy. "Thank you for saying that." Jake nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad someone finally taught me that lesson, even if it had to be the hard way." Leah watched him go, feeling a weight lifted. The cycle of violence that had destroyed her sister's life didn't have to continue. People could change, even bullies. That evening, Leah sat at her family's table helping her mother cook, just as she had before. But everything felt different, lighter, as if she had finally found the balance between strength and control that her mother had been trying to teach her. "So," Carmen said as she seasoned their meal, "I heard from Mrs. Garcia that something happened at school today." Leah smiled, knowing that news traveled fast. Jake apologized. Carmen nodded. "That takes courage, for him to admit he was wrong and for you to accept it." "You always said that true strength means knowing when not to fight," Leah said. "But you never told me that it also means knowing when to stop fighting." Carmen looked at her with pride. "Some lessons can only be learned through experience, Mija. You had to find that balance yourself." Leah thought about Jake's defeat, about the fear and respect she now saw in other students' eyes, about the responsibility that came with having skills others didn't have. "Do you think Alba could have learned that lesson if she'd had more time?" Carmen was quiet, her hands still. "I think Alba had the same strength you do, the same heart. But she lived in a different world, with different choices." She turned to face Leah. "You have something she didn't have. You have the chance to use your strength to protect people instead of destroying them." Leah nodded, understanding. She thought about Miguel Sanchez's help, about the students who now looked to her as someone who would stand up for them. Her victory over Jake hadn't just been about stopping a bully. It had been about showing everyone, including herself, that strength without compassion was just another form of weakness. The next morning, Leah walked into Northwood Academy with her head held high, no longer hiding or trying to blend in. She had learned that respect couldn't be earned through being unseen, that standing up for yourself meant accepting the responsibility that came with being strong enough to make a difference. As she moved through the hallways, Leah noticed things she had missed. A freshman being harassed, a girl sitting alone crying, a boy whose books had been scattered while students pretended not to see. Leah had spent months being invisible, hoping to avoid becoming a target. Now she understood that her mother's lessons about strength weren't just about fighting. They were about choosing when to act and when to stand aside, when to help and when to let others solve their own problems. Jake Harrison had taught her something, even if he hadn't meant to, that the world was full of people who would test you. But Leah had taught him that strength without wisdom was just another form of weakness, and that everyone deserved to be treated with respect. The scars of their fight would fade, but the lessons they had learned would last. Leah had found her voice and her place in a world that had seemed unwelcoming. Jake had learned that actions have consequences and that true strength comes from helping others. And in the end, both of them had discovered that the most important battles aren't won through violence, but through the courage to change, to grow, and to become better than they used to be. Undet Kronisun Sitkin,